Over the course of the next month, Wendy and Dipper worked covertly to fill those gaps in their memory that Wendy's deal with Cooper had left. Apparently, everyone else in Gravity Falls and beyond weren't impacted, and carried on as if Tracy Corduroy had always been around. Had never gotten sick and passed away. What really caught Dipper off guard was his own apparent relationship with Wendy's mom, a woman who seemed genuinely fond of Wendy's younger friend. In fact, Dipper was surprised to discover that he and Mabel were pretty much treated like unofficial members of the family by the Corduroy matriarch. Even more surprising was Mabel's role in relaying a lot of that information to an utterly confused Dipper. Now, for about the first 2 weeks after the reunion of mother and daughter, Dipper didn't see much of Wendy, and he was okay with that. She needed time to get reacquainted with her mom, and it gave Dipper time to visit with other friends, and even his twin sister, who he didn't get to see much either since going off to college. That changed rather abruptly though, and before Dipper knew it, he'd been reinserted heavily into Wendy's rotation for things to do. If she wasn't working or spending time with family, she was hanging out with Dipper and occasionally Mabel when the busy girl was available. Wendy had been extremely bubbly over the past month, and from Dipper's point of view, it couldn't have been just because of her mother's miraculous resurrection. That conversation they'd had by the pond concerning how rough Wendy's life had been recently, well, that life had done a complete 180. Her mother was in her life. She'd found a better job, one she actually enjoyed and paid quite a bit more money. She was able to move out of her smallish apartment and into a larger place closer to both her parents' house, and conveniently for Dipper, where he was currently residing as well. As far as things went in the friends department, he and Mabel were all Wendy seemed to need, and she appeared contented. In fact, she was acting a little extra friendly towards Dipper, and it was hard not to notice. Wendy had never been shy about teasing Dipper, she just loved to make him blush, but this felt different. This felt like Wendy was testing the waters for something, and Dipper just wasn't sure what the something was quite yet. And he didn't want to set himself up for disappointment if he was wrong. So, that's why Dipper was put just a little bit on edge when Wendy invited him over for movie night, rekindling that long-standing tradition from way back when they first became friends. Where they'd laugh and rip apart a cheesy old horror movie or two while stuffing their faces full of the unhealthiest snacks they could get their hands on. Their first movie night in almost 2 years, and Dipper was both excited to spend quality time with a good friend doing something they both enjoyed, and absolutely terrified that something was going to go horribly wrong. For example, he could either, 1, misinterpret Wendy's intentions and then do something stupid to upset her that might damage their friendship, or 2, misinterpret Wendy's intentions and not do anything at all which might upset her and risk missing out on something amazing. It was a lose-lose harder situation as far as Dipper was concerned, and that feeling was making it difficult to pump himself up for a night he'd been looking forward to for days. Ultimately, he decided he just wasn't going to worry about it. He'd accepted a long time ago that he and Wendy were probably only ever going to friends, and he was okay with that. He wasn't going to risk losing the good thing he had by rocking the boat now. If Wendy didn't like it, she'd just have to get used to the fact that he was only interested in her as a friend now, just like he had to do with her so many years ago. Yeah, like he wouldn't completely cave on those principles the second Wendy smiled at him. "You sure your mother's okay with you having a guy sleep over at your place? She strikes me as the old-fashioned type who wouldn't approve of that, regardless of whether you're an adult or not." "Are you kiddin'?" Wendy rolled her eyes. "She made it a point to remind me to bring condoms just in case things got frisky. The real scary part is that I only think she was half jokin'. Dipper blushed heavily at the thought. He really didn't need this crap right now. Like that was ever going to happen in the first place. Dipper let out a weak laugh that somehow morphed into a mild cough. Damn, his throat was dry. To make matters worse, Wendy didn't immediately fall in step and agree with him, instead choosing just to smirk at him playfully before looking away. God damn it, did he not need this shit? Never hurts to be prepared, right? Now that was a joke, Dipper could tell, and he was comfortable with that. Comfortable enough to tease his favorite redhead right back. "Well, let your mom know that I appreciate her trying to help get me laid. I figured if that ever happened and your dad didn't kill me first, she'd be the one to do it." "Oh, please. Mom absolutely adores you. She complains all the time about the guys I date, and how the only one I've ever brought home that she actually likes was the one I wasn't dating. Hey, and whose fault is that? Blew your chance to make your mom happy. Wendy playfully swatted him on the shoulder. Both were seated on the couch in the living room of her apartment, a bucket of popcorn between them and a grocery list of drinks and junk food covering the coffee table. Well, we haven't done this in a while, bub, so I hope you picked a good one for us. Oh, did I ever? The movie's not as old as we're used, from the 90s actually. Dipper found the bargain bin DVD case beneath a box of Twinkies. How could I resist a movie that featured a werewolf fighting a Sasquatch? Wendy just couldn't help but return his cheesy grin. Sounds perfect. What are we waiting for then, dude? Fire it up. Dipper complied with his host's wishes, and the movie delivered spectacularly. It was everything they could have hoped for. Cheesy dialogue, atrocious acting, and two of the worst monster costumes your local thrift store could offer. Bigfoot looked more like a gorilla than a missing link, and the rubber wolf mask was simply unredeemable. There was even a cheesy romance plot thrown in between the werewolf and the female lead, including a rather cringeworthy make-out scene with the werewolf while in costume. Yuck, is this scene ever going to end? She's basically licking rubber at this point. Is a little smooching making Dipper all uncomfortable? Don't worry, you're cute. You'll find a girl that wants to kiss you one of these days, and then we'll see how gross you think it is then. Why do you just assume I've never kissed a girl before? Dipper half grumbled, slightly offended. I've had a couple of girlfriends in my lifetime, so I've done my share of kissing, thank you very much. Girlfriends? I had no idea. Wendy feigned, of course, knowing full well about them. And here I foolishly thought that you've been savant yourself for me all these years. Right, because I was really looking forward to dying a virgin. Just so you know, I've even been told I'm a pretty good kisser. Oh really? Wendy cooed smugly. She'd been waiting for this type of opening all night. She moved the popcorn bowl and scooted over as close to Dipper as she could get without sitting in his lap before locking her eyes with his. Prove it. Huh? Dipper spaced out momentarily, lost in that sea of green peering back at. A glint hidden within them that seemed to suggest that she was anything but playing games with him. I said. Prove it. She emphasized, the playfulness in her voice all but gone. It was more like a demand or even a challenge. To even Dipper's tremendous surprise, he accepted. He closed what little distance was left between them and pressed his lips to hers. It wasn't a little peck either, filled with all the intensity and fury he'd always imagined he'd used whenever he fantasized about kissing her over the years. The fact that Dipper took the bait so easily legit caught Wendy by surprise, but she recovered quickly, and didn't even need Dipper's hand at the back of her neck to guide her into returning the kiss with, determined to match his intensity and maybe even outdo him if possible. Her hands found their way to the back of Dipper's head almost without realizing it. What was supposed to be quick kiss lingered for a good half a minute that somehow managed to feel like an eternity and an instant at the same time. For a brief moment, their roles switched somewhat. Wendy was actually blushing and temporarily lost for words. It had been years since a simple, if not enthusiastic, kiss had this type of effect on her. And she was positive she'd never felt these particular surges shoot through her body, making every last skin cell feel like it was on fire. So, was that proof enough? Dipper smirked, trying to come across as smug and confident. And god damn it, he actually succeeded. I dunno. Wendy panted huskily. I need more data first. Wendy was back on him before Dipper even had time to brace himself. The combination of his current position and Wendy's weight forced him down to his back, where Dipper finally managed to gather himself and start kissing back, wrapping his arms around her waist. The kid gloves had been completely discarded at this point, and her tongue was in his mouth before he was fully prepared for it, but damn, he sure wasn't about to complain. When their lips did part, it was only briefly to breathe, or for Wendy to shift her focus to another body part. like his neck, which nearly caused Dipper to bounce right off the couch. He allowed his brain to shut down and enjoy the sensation, still somehow not completely convinced this wasn't one of his more vivid dreams. It wasn't until the redhead's hands started to wander towards places they definitely only went in those dreams, that Dipper somehow miraculously came to his senses. Wendy. We need to stop. Either Wendy hadn't heard what he said or chose to ignore him. Despite really not wanting to do it, he gradually managed to gently push Wendy off of him and grab her attention. Wah. What's wrong? She asked, still slightly hovering over him, looking a mix of concerned and hurt. We probably shouldn't be doing this, Dipper admitted reluctantly. God, did it hurt to say that? He wisely chose not to jump up off the couch in accordance with his initial instinct, but instead sat up and remained next to her in hopes of conveying he wasn't outright rejecting her or trying to distance himself. He even took her hand in his, a gesture which thankfully she didn't reject. In fact, her expression softened considerably. Why the hell not exactly? She asked harshly and didn't care that it sounded that way. Wendy. You're my best friend. As much as I might want what we seem to be getting dangerously close to doing, I don't want to make things awkward between us. They'll only be awkward if you choose to make them that way. Wendy frowned slightly but didn't let go of his hand. What exactly do you think was going on here? I don't know. When your hands started wandering down there. You know. No, you got that part right, you dork. Wendy managed a laugh in spite of her frustration. Well, I didn't exactly plan on things getting that heated, especially that quick. Not that I would have regretted it, mind you, but that's not the point. What I mean is, why do you think this happened? You said I was your best friend, so you should know me well enough to guess why I pushed things in this direction. Dipper had an idea. He just didn't dare say it aloud for fear he was wrong. Heat of the moment? Damn it, Dipper. Wendy finally let go of his hand and started to shift around uncomfortably. She looked uncharacteristically bashful, unable to meet Dipper's eyes as she said, You're really going to make me get all sentimental and sappy, aren't you? I guess sticking my tongue down your throat wasn't a good enough hint. Look, man, we do work well together as friends. You're one of the few people in my life I know I can trust and never have to think twice about it. Actually, I think we're good for each other and well. I don't think I'd mind giving being more than friends a chance. Dipper couldn't believe what he was hearing. If this had been any other time in his life. Wendy. You remember that I have to go back to college in a couple of months, right? Yeah, so what? We may have gotten off to a slow start, but we still have the rest of the summer. That's the problem though, isn't it? Dipper sighed and looked Wendy straight in her bright green eyes. I'm sorry, but I don't want to be a summer fling. It's not worth it if our friendship somehow gets damaged in the process. Dude, you're still not getting it, Wendy sighed while taking both of Dipper's hands in hers. I'm not good with this junk, but here it goes. If all I wanted was a summer fling, I wouldn't be going to you for it. What I want is you. Not a fling, not a one-night stand. I want to be with you. Wherever you go, whatever you're doing. If you're still not getting it, then we're boned, dude, because I can't dumb it down any more than that. Wendy could only watch on in fascination as Dipper's mental faculties seemed to shut down. A croaking sound left his mouth as he was apparently rendered mute, and quite possibly forgot how to breathe for a second. After a few moments of one titanic struggle to accept the idea that this was reality, Dipper finally managed to utter a meek, "Why?" Wendy blinked. Then doubled over in laughter to Dipper's total confusion. She kept one hand intertwined with his, as she wiped a tear away with her other hand. That right there is exactly why, Dipper. Especially when I'm the one who should be asking you that question. Wendy wrapped both arms around Dipper's neck, the look of complete disbelief never leaving his face. Good thing for us that we have you to be the sensible one who always keeps things in perspective and helps keeps our heads on straight. And good thing for us, I'm the type of girl that's not afraid to jump right in and try to take what she wants. What she wanted was to kiss him again, so that's exactly what she did, and Dipper wasted no motion reciprocating this time. It wasn't like the frenzied lust-filled kiss that nearly lured them to parts unknown minutes before, but rather a soft, fulfilling one. A kiss that seemed to solidify whatever the couple were to each other now. They could worry about titles later. As the kiss lingered, however, it grew increasingly less innocent, and Wendy felt that now recognizable tingling surged through her body again. She pulled back momentarily to get some air, but before she could move in for another kiss, she felt a strange tickle in her throat, forcing her to close her mouth before she could spew whatever was trying to come up into Dipper's face. She turned her head and coughed a couple of times before turning back to Dipper. "Sorry about that, dude. Now, where were we?" Dipper had recovered by this point and managed a smile, but before their lips could touch, Wendy had to tilt her head to cough again. Only this time much more violently, almost dry heaving actually. It went on seemingly forever this time, with Wendy actually having to stand up off the couch and try walking around to see if the action would help cure her coughing fit. "Wendy. Are you alright?" "Yeah, I'll be okay." She coughed again. "I'm going to the bathroom. I'll be back in a sec." Wendy quite literally ran to her bathroom, coughing the entire way. She closed the door and suffered through another violent heaving attack. Once the fit had run its course, Wendy pulled her hand away from her mouth, only to find mucus tinted with blood on her palm. "No, it can't be. It's too soon. Besides, even if it was, I'm not letting it ruin tonight for us." After she survived through a couple of minutes cough-free, Wendy finally left the bathroom only to find Dipper standing sentry right outside the door looking very concerned. "Wendy, you positive everything's alright?" "Yep, all good. Nothing to worry about, dude," Wendy smiled, as she took Dipper by the hand. "Where are we going?" Dipper asked as he noticed they weren't headed towards the living room. "The bedroom," Wendy smirked, only to immediately break out in another coughing fit. Dipper completely overlooked the innuendo, more concerned with how Wendy's hand felt warm. He put his hand up to her forehead, to Wendy's mild embarrassment. "You're running a bit warm, Wendy. And you've got a little bit of sweat on your forehead. Are you sure you're feeling okay?" "Yeah, I'm perfectly fine." "Come on, Dip, we did get pretty heated just a few minutes ago. You gonna tell me you didn't feel a little warm after all that?" "Well, good point actually." Dipper smiled. Wendy smiled back. Before promptly launching into another coughing fit, once again spewing that dubious red-green substance into her hand. Panicked, Wendy quickly closed her palm to try and hide it. Dipper noticed anyway. "Is that blood?" "No, just some phlegm. Must be coming down with something. Just let me." "Whoa." Wendy stumbled a bit as the room started to spin. Struggling to steady herself, she tried to take a step towards the kitchen only to stumble backwards, Dipper catching her being the only reason she didn't fall to the floor. "Yeah, you're definitely getting sick. Let me help you to the couch." Wendy didn't argue. Dipper guided her over to her sofa and helped her sit down. He then went to retrieve a wet rag for her, so she could clean of the phlegm, which Dipper didn't believe in the slightest, off of her hand. After depositing the towel in her clothing hamper, Dipper returned and sat down next to her. After a moment or so of silence, he proceeded to glare at her with a look that conveyed both concern and a demand for answers. The unease she felt at his unasked questions was worse than the coughing and dizzy spells by a landslide. "I'm sorry, Dip." What a way to spoil the mood, right? "I don't care about that right now. All I'm concerned with is you and whether you're feeling well or not." A weak smile crossed Wendy's lips. She felt silly for even considering he might be upset with her because of that, even if that feeling was only fleeting. She knew better than that. "I will be. I think I just need to rest." "Definitely." Dipper paused, not quite sure how to follow that up. A part of him felt it was probably in Wendy's best interest to climb into bed as soon as possible, but he wasn't comfortable with the idea of leaving her alone just yet. Not until he was certain she was well enough to be left to her own devices. Why don't we just chill out for a bit and finish watching the movie? Sounds like a plan, dude. And so that's what they did, viewing what remained of the film's runtime in relative silence while only half paying attention to it. Wendy's head did eventually find its way onto Dipper's shoulder, which he happily allowed while also deciding no further contact was necessary and likely inappropriate. Mercifully, Wendy made it to the closing credits without any further episodes other than the occasional small cough, so Dipper decided it might be safe to leave if that's what Wendy desired. You look like you're doing a bit better. I should probably head out and let you get some rest. And hopefully take care of whatever's ailing you. That's probably a good idea. Wendy admitted reluctantly. She didn't really want him to leave, but her body felt absolutely exhausted, and all she wanted to do at that moment was crawl into bed and sleep for a week. Come on, I'll walk you to the door. Already on his feet, Dipper said, I think I can manage on my own, you know. She ignored him of course, and they slowly made the short walk from the couch to the front door of Wendy's apartment. His hand halfway to the doorknob, he paused and gave Wendy one last critical look. Is there anything I can do for you before I go, Wendy? You sure you're going to be all right by yourself? I'm not some helpless damsel, Dip, I'll be fine, Wendy laughed. Dipper smiled half-heartedly in return before turning to leave. He was halfway out the door when Wendy grabbed him by the arm, Dipper turning to look at her with concern, only for that concern to be quelled by the warmest smile the ill-feeling Wendy could manage. I'm going to make tonight up to you eventually. I can promise you that. Somehow, Dipper managed not to blush. You don't owe me a thing, Wendy, you know that. Hey now, it's not just for you, buddy. Dipper smiled and nodded his head. He finally managed to escape the building without being interrupted. Wendy slowly closed the door, but hastily locked it behind him, before pressing her forehead against the door. She was almost shaking, trapped in a minor state of panic. It's not what you think, Wendy. It's probably just the flu, or a bug you picked up somewhere. It can't be what you're thinking, it's too soon. It can't be happening now of all times, that's just not fair. Unfortunately for Wendy, life often wasn't fair. Especially when you make bargains with one-eyed interdimensional demons. 24 days. That's how long it had been since Dipper had seen Wendy. Hell, it was the last time he'd even spoken to her face-to-face. There had been a few text messages, and one brief very curt phone call, but that was all the contact he'd had with her since the night Wendy had basically confessed that she wanted to explore the possibility of the two of them being something more than friends. Now it felt like the sound of her hastily locking the door that night was symbolic of Wendy locking him out of her life for good. It was one of his worst fears come to fruition. The reason he vowed never to dare try and test the waters of he and Wendy ever being more than friends, afraid she would shun him just as it appeared she had. He had no idea what he'd done wrong. Maybe he hadn't, and Wendy just regretted what she'd done, and now couldn't bring herself to face him. There was no way to know because nobody was talking. Wendy wasn't talking to him, and none of their few mutual friends and acquaintances were telling him anything if they did now. This left only one avenue for Dipper to explore to hopefully receive some answers. Wendy's mother had a soft spot for him, and even Dipper could recognize that. While he highly doubted the elder Corduroy would sell out her daughter, but it couldn't hurt to try. Dipper had no idea who else to turn to, and if anybody knew what was going on with Wendy, it would be her mother. Oh, well, hello there, Dipper. Mrs. Corduroy greeted him cautiously. An instant hint to Dipper that talking to her was going to be even more difficult than he feared. What brings you here? Good afternoon, Mrs. Corduroy. I just wanted to talk to you about something. Do you mind if I come inside? I suppose not. Come on in. Make yourself at home. Dipper thanked her and followed the Corduroy matriarch inside and into the kitchen. Interacting with Mrs. Corduroy was always weird for Dipper. Not in a bad way necessarily. She looked so much like a slightly older version of his best friend, that if it wasn't for their differing fashion sense, Dipper could see himself forgetting which one he was actually talking to on occasion. It was also strange trying to relate to a person he'd only known personally for a couple of months, yet she'd known him for nearly a 1/3 of his life. That was just the kind of thing that happens sometimes when you warp time and space to bring somebody back from the dead. She treated him like an honorary member of the Corduroy clan, while he felt like he barely knew her. Is anybody else around? Nope, I'm the only one home at the moment, she responded as she took a seat at her dining room table. And if it's Wendy you're looking for, she's not here. I didn't think she'd be. But she is kind of what I wanted to talk about. I figured as much, she sighed. Dipper, you know there isn't much I can do to help you. She doesn't want to see or talk to you at the moment. But why? That's all I want to know, and just maybe I can maintain a grip on my sanity. Things were going so well between us, and all of a sudden I'm persona non grata to her. I just want to know what I did wrong. I have no idea what you did, Dipper. Wendy refuses to really talk about it. And it wouldn't be my place to say anything even if I did know. This is between you and her, and I need to respect my daughter's wishes. And right now, that wish is to have nothing to do with you. I should never have gone over to her place that night, Dipper rambled to himself mostly. That's when this started. I knew I'd screw something up, I just knew it. We were perfectly well off just being friends, I didn't need anything more than that. Now I've fucked up everything. Mrs. Corduroy eyed the boy curiously. Something she'd picked out of his ramblings to himself really piqued her interest. Dipper. Sit down, please. It wasn't a request, so Dipper complied immediately. It was bad for your health to cross a Corduroy woman when they wanted you to do something. I'll make you a deal. Wendy's been really cagey about what happened between the two of you that night. I always suspected that had something to do with your little tiff. Let's do this then. You tell me exactly what happened between the two of you that night, and maybe I'll cough up the information you're looking for if I'm satisfied with what I hear. That sounds fair, Dipper gulped as he tried to put into words what exactly had gone down that night. Well, we kind of sort of kissed for one. Kissed. Okay. More like made out for a while actually, but we stopped just shy of going too far. Then we had an interesting conversation where Wendy hinted. Hell, she straight up told me she was interested in being more than friends. She's the one who actually had to convince me, not that she had to try very hard, then she got sick and that kind of put a halt to the night, but everything seemed fine between us when I left. Then she avoided all my calls the next morning, and it's been pretty much radio silence ever since. I don't know if she regretted what we did, or if I horribly misread her intentions, but I just want to know what I need to apologize for so we can move on. Even if she doesn't want anything else to do with me, don't I at least deserve to know why? So, that's what's going on, the elder Corduroy muttered to herself. She couldn't know for certain, but she had a pretty good idea now why Wendy had decided to distance herself from Dipper. Why she rushed to that decision so quickly she still had no idea, but she understood why she made it at least. She didn't agree with it, but she understood. Dang it, Wendy. You know what's going on in her head then? Dipper surmised based on her reaction. I answered your question. Would you please be willing to tell me what's going on? Dipper. Now you listen to me, she said, her face stern and serious. I'm only going to tell you this because I do believe you have the right to know, but mostly because I personally think it's in my daughter's best interest as well. You have to swear to me though that you're not going to tell her you heard any of this from me. She's difficult enough to deal with at the moment as it is without her knowing I broke her trust. Of course I promise. I wouldn't throw you under the bus after helping me out. I know you wouldn't. On purpose anyhow. She sighed and then rubbed at the suddenly intensifying ache in her head. That stubborn girl should be the one doing this. Dipper. Wendy is. Wendy's sick. Very sick. Again? Mrs. Corduroy gave him a slightly annoyed look that told him to guess again. Still? That's strange, but what does being sick have to do with Wendy ghosting me? Because Dipper. It's the type of sick that takes a toll on your body quick and the type you don't recover from. And as ridiculous as her reasoning is, if you know my daughter like you think you do, then you'd understand exactly why she cut you out of her life. Especially after what happened between you two that night. She was right, Dipper did understand, even more so than she did since Dipper had information Wendy's mother lacked. He bolted straight up in his chair as that revelation slapped him across the face, knocking said chair over in the process. Mrs. Corduroy stared at him in concern, assuming his reaction was due to hearing the news of Wendy's terminal diagnosis. Another misconception. Dipper was shocked because he now knew exactly what Wendy had done. I need to go talk to her. Now. Whoa, hold your horses, Dipper. You can't just go rushing over there in a huff. For one, she'll probably realize somebody blabbed with the vibe you're giving off right now, and two, you'll never get past the front door in the first place. She's pretty damn determined for you not to her right now. Well, I'm not giving her a choice. If she only has so much time left on this world, I'll be damned if I'm going to let her shut me out of what little is left of it. Not without a fight at least. And don't worry about her finding out you told me. I'm smart enough to figure out a way to convince her I figured it out on my own, and she knows I am too. Dipper began to stomp his way towards the exit of the corduroy cabin, though he didn't forget to show proper gratitude to Wendy's mother first. Thank you for letting me know. You have no idea how much that information means to me. Mrs. Corduroy said nothing further as Dipper hastily exited the house. Under other circumstances, it would have warmed her heart to see Dipper's resolve to make things right with her little girl. If only they could have sorted themselves out sooner. Wendy's head felt like it was splitting open. The persistent knocking and ringing at her doorbell weren't doing anything to help matters. She hoped if she ignored the unwelcomed guest long enough, they'd go the fuck away, but that wasn't happening. The pounding just seemed to get louder and more obnoxious. Finally, Wendy had enough, and dragged her butt out of bed, determined to murder whoever was on the other side of that door, or at least maim them severely. Wendy could still get around fairly well despite her illness, which allowed her to wall herself off to the world and not burden anybody else. Despite her friends' and family's persistent attempts to do just that. That didn't mean moving around wasn't an arduous task, and she'd rather not be forced to do so when she didn't have to. Any walk further than her bedroom to her bathroom or kitchen made her lungs feel like they were on fire. She finally dragged herself to her front door, only to flinch at other round of aggressive knocking. I'm coming, damn it. Stop the damn pounding already. What the hell do you even want? Wendy. It's Dipper, and we need to talk. Wendy stiffened. This was the last thing she needed right now. No, we don't. I'm not taking visitors, least of all you. I'm not leaving until you explain to me why that is. I'm done playing this game, waiting and hoping you'll come around eventually and tell me what the hell is going on. 1 minute you're practically seducing me, and the very next day you basically cut me out of your life entirely. It was a mistake, Dipper. Shouldn't me telling you to stay away and leave me alone be hint enough? Go away. No, it's not good enough. If you want me out of your life so damn bad then fine, but you're not getting off that easy. You're going to have to look me in the eye and tell me. After everything we've been through together, I deserve at least that much. Wendy wanted to slam her head against the door. Because he was right, but she couldn't give him what he wanted. If he was looking straight at her, peering into her soul like only he could, there was no way she'd be able to lie to him to his face like that. You're the one that told me I didn't owe you anything, remember? Now get out of here before I call the police. If the neighbors haven't already with the scene you're making. So you want to play dirty then, huh? Fine then, I can get dirty too. If you don't open this door and let me in right now. I'll tell everyone what you've done, Wendy. I'll tell everyone what happened that night, and we'll both have to deal with the shitstorm that follows. Somehow, I don't think you want that. Wendy's eyes widened in horror. A part of her wanted to call his bluff, confident that Dipper would never actually betray her like that. Then again, he may just be that desperate considering how she'd been treating him recently. She wouldn't really blame him for going scorched earth on her. Not wanting to take the risk of all her friends and family knowing her dirty little secret, she unlocked the door and opened it, quickly turning her back to him so he couldn't see her face. You got 5 minutes to say your piece, and then I expect you to get the fuck out. I don't have anything to say, Dipper said coldly, as he closed the door behind him. You're the one that has the explaining to do. If you want me to leave, I told you what you have to do. Look me in the eye and tell me, Wendy. Tell me you never want to see or talk to me again, and I'll make your wish come true. Wendy shuddered at the word wish. She hesitated for too many reasons to list, but she finally complied and slowly turned around to face her estranged friend. All Dipper's passionate determination evaporated the second he saw her face. He didn't see the fiery, angry redhead he'd expected. Instead, he was staring down a scared, sickly pale-looking girl with bloodshot eyes and unkempt hair that looked like it hadn't seen a brush in weeks. Her usual attire had been replaced by a baggy sweatshirt with matching sweatpants, and judging by their condition, probably hadn't been changed in days. Dipper's worst fear had come to fruition. You did do it, didn't you? Your deal with Cooper to get your mother back. I had my suspicions when I noticed some of your symptoms that night matched the early stages of whatever disease your mother had, but I never. That was it though, wasn't it? In exchange, you had to contract the disease yourself. Wendy tried to look Dipper in the eye, but that turned out to be a colossal mistake. She saw so much love, pity, and concern in that face of his. Everything she'd been trying to avoid for weeks. She had to turn her back to him again before she broke down. Don't look at me like that. This is exactly why I wanted you to stay away. I didn't want you to see me like this. Wendy stiffened, and her eyes widened as she felt Dipper's arms wrap around her waist from behind. He held her back against his chest as he placed his chin atop her shoulder. Why didn't you tell me? I could have been here for you. And you wouldn't have to be facing this thing alone. This is my doing, Dipper. My burden to bear, not anybody else's. I didn't want to be pitted, or have to watch the people I care about watch me wither away and die. And that includes you. Well, tough shit, because I'm not going anywhere. I love you, and you're just going to have to deal with that. Wendy let out a sharp gasp, as her eyes snapped open wide. From there, she completely lost it. Tears filling her eyes, she forced herself to turn her body around despite Dipper's strong grip and buried herself into his chest, allowing a tidal wave of pent-up emotions pour out all over him, every ounce of which Dipper quietly accepted. I thought I had years, Dip. Mom was nearly 40 when she started getting sick, so I didn't think this was going to happen so soon. There's so much I'm going to miss out on. I'm not ready to die. I'm not ready to die. Dipper had no clue what to say to that. Who possibly could? He just held her quietly for as long as the girl needed until just didn't seem to have the energy to cry anymore. Then, and only then, did he bring up the question nagging away at him. Why didn't you just tell me, Wendy? If you knew you didn't have much time left, why haven't we been spending as much of that time as we could together, or with people that love you? Why wall yourself away like a prisoner? I didn't want my family to see how weak and pathetic I've become. As for you, for some stupid reason I thought that if I pushed you away, maybe when I finally bit it, you wouldn't feel so bad, since I've been such an ass to you lately. Yet here you are after everything. And I don't understand why. I don't deserve it. Why would you even think that? I should be asking you that question. Wendy weakly pushed herself off of Dipper, who just watched her in confusion. She wanted to look angry, but it was just too difficult to manage. How could she be angry with him right now? Why are you like this with me? It's been that way since you were a kid. You treat me like I'm some goddess dropped down from heaven, but that's not me. What you're looking at right now is the real me. A lazy screw-up that makes mistake after mistake. The biggest one lately being pushing somebody that cares about me away because, on some weird level, I thought it would make things easier for me. How can you say you love that? What does it matter, was Dipper's honest reply. I just do, and that's all that does. I'm not supposed to love you because you have faults. I'd be more concerned if you didn't. There's so much more to you than just that anyway. Well, you'll have to forgive me if I don't have a particularly positive mindset right now. That was stupid, Wendy. Why you shut me out? Regardless of where our relationship stood the moment you died, it was going to devastate me all the same. Keeping me at distance wasn't doing anything but hurting the both of us. But I don't want to dwell on that any more than I have to. I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving your side until they put you in the ground. What if I don't want that? Wendy sniffed. Then convince me, leave. It won't be easy, but if that's what you really want. It wasn't. She just didn't want to be treated like an invalid. I don't want to be treated like I'm fragile or can't take care of myself. I'm sick, not crippled or dead yet. I won't overstep. I'll just stay by your side if that's all you really want. Either way, I'll be here whatever it is you decide you want or need. Wendy didn't know how to respond. All she did know was that now that he was here, she didn't want him to go. Dipper made good on his promises. He never left her side except for when he absolutely had to, or when Wendy would request it. Surprisingly, or maybe not considering this was Wendy, she didn't really need a whole lot of help. She could still get around just fine and perform pretty much any function she was capable of doing before she got sick. Her biggest problems were quickly becoming exhausted if she overdid things, and the frequent aches her body was racked with made those basic functions a little more difficult to accomplish. Dipper mainly focused on the things Wendy hadn't been able to get around to, or just didn't care to do herself. Like a load of laundry or two and washing the dishes. Wendy protested the entire time, of course, but she appreciated his intentions nonetheless. Most importantly though, Dipper's presence had a calming effect that was much appreciated. She still felt miserable, but having him around made her situation seem a little less hopeless, if that made any sense. Just knowing he was close by if she did need him was comforting, so much so that she was cursing herself for the months she denied herself that comfort due to a damnable combination of stubborn pride and false sense of self-sacrifice. Maybe she could have even made good on that promise she made to the both of them to consummate their relationship, back when she was still healthy enough that fulfilling that promise was a realistic possibility. Dipper had even convinced Wendy to let her mother in and make her dinner one night, the boy having not fully realized that he wasn't the only person Wendy had been shutting out. Dipper spent the first night he stayed at Wendy's on her couch, but by night 2, Wendy had convinced him to join her in her bed. Dipper was very apprehensive about it at first, but acquiesced once he understood she only wanted him to sleep in the bed with her and nothing more. His job was to simply lay there and let Wendy use him as a giant body pillow or teddy bear, and it was a duty he enjoyed and turned out to be rather good at. Dipper brought a warmth to Wendy's nighttime ritual, a warmth that had been sorely missing as she often struggled to stay warm at night even beneath the warm sleepwear and heavy comforter of her bed. Dipper's presence seemed to alleviate that issue somewhat. She still had a challenging time getting to sleep with the looming scepter of her pending demise hovering over her head, but at least knowing Dipper was there made the long difficult nights somewhat tolerable. During one of those nights she couldn't quite fall asleep. She could tell Dipper was out by the sound of him lightly snoring. Wendy took a moment to watch him sleep and appreciate the friend she was no longer sure she deserved. She wondered what their life might have ended up like if she hadn't struck a deal with that demon. She thought about the true reason she had decided to distance herself from Dipper at first and keep her illness under wraps. That warped idea of hers that Dipper would somehow learn to hate her and somehow not be affected by his death, and her pride just not wanting Dipper to see her in such a weak and pathetic state did play their part, but there was still a more integral reason for Wendy to keep Dipper in the dark. One she could never share with him out of fear that, if he hadn't come up with the idea on his own already, she didn't want to accidentally give it him. The thought still terrified her. She brushed a few strands of hair away from his eyes and couldn't fight off the soft smile tugging at her lips. Seeing him like this, in a state where he'd be none the wiser, she finally worked up the nerve to tell him what she had yet to be able to say to his face. "I love you too, dork." Several days had passed, and Wendy had grown accustomed to waking up to the reassuring warmth of her best friend radiating all over her. On this late evening, however, she awoke to the feeling of bitter cold. The source of her warmth, Dipper Pines, was not currently in the bed with her. She chalked his absence up to Dipper needing to use the bathroom or something of the like, and restlessly waited for his return. Wendy didn't start getting concerned until 15 minutes had passed without the return of her houseguest. She decided to pull her aching bones out of bed and set off to look for him. He wasn't in the bathroom, her first guess, and he wasn't in the kitchen either. Her apartment wasn't all that large, so she quickly ran out of places to look, forcing Wendy to come to the sobering conclusion that he was gone. He'd left somewhere in the night while she lay asleep. Why he'd abandoned her like that so suddenly she didn't know. Maybe he just grew weary of seeing her in the pathetic state she was in. No, Dipper wouldn't do that to her. If he was gone, then he had a good reason to be gone. As to what that reason could be, Wendy could only think of one, and that option terrified her to her very core. She anxiously rushed into the kitchen and checked the calendar next to her refrigerator. She struggled to remember what the date was. She hadn't exactly been the best at keeping track of her days in recent weeks. Let's see. Dippers show up on Saturday, so that would make today the 28th. She checked the date and went completely numb. Her worst fear was staring right back at her. No, 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 no. Wendy wasted no time gathering her shoes, keys, and wallet. She didn't care how much her body was protesting, or that she wasn't supposed to drive due to her frequent dizzy spells. Breathing heavily as she opened the door to her car, she took a quick look up at the sky and frowned. The full moon seemed to stare right back as if taunting her. Chick. Ta. Ka. Nook. Chick, ta, ra, ning, amok. Dipper stepped away from the cave wall, eyes hardened as he watched the now familiar light, awaiting the being that would emerge from within. Hello, customers. Welcome to. Cooper Scroll paused and blinked in surprise when he got a good look at who it was that had summoned him. Oh, it's you again. Don't act surprised. I'm pretty sure you know why I'm here. Oh, I'm not surprised, and I do know exactly why you're here, Cooper sneered condescendingly. You're just late. I was expecting you a month ago. I wasn't aware of the nature of the deal you made with Wendy until recently. And unfortunately, any attempt to locate this cave outside the night of the full moon proved fruitless. Found the wrecked ATV, but no cave. Well, of course. Cooper twirled and tipped his hat to his young visitor. No full moon, no shrine, no yours truly. Those are the rules after all. Cooper's expression turned unexpectedly serious. Your red-headed lady friend is still kicking, right? She's alive, but there's no telling for how much longer, so let's not waste any time. I'm here to make a deal, and I'm fairly sure you know what I want. Naturally. You want little ol' me to cure your lady friend for her current ailment. Which I am certainly capable of doing, but as you may remember, Red's request taxed my powers to their limits, so undoing the cost of our agreement is going to be equally as expensive. I'm well aware of that. Just tell me what you want from me, and let's get this over with. Which could be what I wonder. You want to pass the disease on to me next. Somebody's gotta die from it, right? No, 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 my boy. Cooper cackled jovially. Where's your imagination? That particular deal was unique to your lady friend and her alone. The irony of the daughter agreeing to take on the responsibility of carrying the illness that was supposed to kill her mother was enough to be proud of on its own. Cooper's demeanor grew coy. Almost calculating, and that made Dipper nervous. Not to mention that I fully expected to receive return business for that particular bargain, and here you are. No, for your end of the bargain, the price needs to be tailored and meaningful towards you specifically. I see where this is going, Dipper grumbled bitterly. You seem to appreciate irony, so I'm assuming it will have something to do with my feelings for Wendy. What's it going to be then? You want to take my love for her away? Or make it so he hates me and there's nothing I can do about it? TSK, you're really disappointing me here, kid. Those suggestions are so cliché it's almost offensive. No, what I want from you is something much more personal. Something that defines you to your very core. Dipper stared down Cooper warily as the interdimensional demon made his proposal through telepathic means. Dipper recoiled from complete sticker shock. How do you know about? I can read minds, kid. As long as my clients willingly open their minds to me, that is. It's kind of necessary to pull off the type of deals you humans like to make with me. So, what's it gonna? I accept. Dipper stepped forward and extended his hand. Let's get this over with. Cooper stared at Dipper's outstretched hand, appearing slightly put off. Really? Not even going to try to haggle a little bit? You sure you don't want to think this through a little more before you? Don't pretend like you suddenly care now. You may not be a chaotic force of nature like your cousin Bill was, but considering how you enjoy completely turning people's lives upside down for fun, in a way, you're still every bit as evil as he is. You wound me, sir. Cooper sobbed sarcastically. Seriously though, have you ever considered that constructs like good and evil aren't as black and white to beings like me as they are to you humans? What you consider cruel, I see as a curious case study of the human condition. To see just how far they're willing to push themselves to get what they want. There's been plenty of humans throughout history who've done testing on animals and even other humans for the sake of scientific or social curiosity. Almost none of them are considered benevolent. The only thing I want to know before I make this deal is that I need some assurance that Wendy can't come right back in behind me and undo it. Don't sweat it, kid, that won't be happening. Cooper finally accepted Dipper's hand, a sinister edge slipping into his voice. It's been a pleasure doing business with you. Things are about to get really interesting. Wendy's car skidded to a stop in front of the pond where all her misery began the beginning of that summer. This was as far as her vehicle could take her, so she'd have to make the rest of the trip on foot, no matter how much her body protested. She barely made it 100 feet down the moonlit path before she was out of breath. She tried to power forward, but her body just wouldn't allow it. She fell to her knees, breathing heavily and completely exhausted. Damn it, get up. I don't have much time to stop him before he... Wendy's words got stuck in her throat as an indescribable pain ravaged her body. She curled up into a ball, but almost as soon as the pain hit her, it had already stopped. She released a heavy breath that felt like she'd been storing up for months. Surprised, Wendy stood up with absolutely no trouble. Any sign of her previous trouble breathing was gone, as were the aches that typically dominated her body. Her head was as clear as it had been in weeks. In fact, she felt exactly as she did the day before she started to show signs of illness. Under any other circumstances, Wendy would be elated, but unfortunately, she knew exactly what her sudden recovery meant. No. Please don't let me be too late, please. With her health completely restored, Wendy raced towards the hidden cave at the end of the lighted path, covering that ground with ease. She was both surprised and dismayed to find the entrance to the shrine open and accessible, but at least that meant she had no problem entering herself. She received another surprise when she found Mr. Scroll already floating around the cave pre-summoned, which was not a good sign in the least. In fact, it almost felt like he'd been waiting on someone, presumably herself, which was another red flag. Ah, there you are, Red. I had a feeling you'd show up eventually. You're much more punctual than your boyfriend, I can tell you that much. You look good and healthy given the circumstances. Well-balanced diet? Can it freak? Wendy frantically scanned the small shrine, but there was clearly nobody else but her and the floating rectangle present inside the cave. Where's Dipper? Ah yes, young Mr. Pines. He came, he saw, he gave me dirty looks, told me I was evil. Then we made a deal and left off on his merry way. Well, technically he was never actually here, but... Okay, don't start up with the riddle, Scroll. When did he leave? I know he was here. Seeing as a few minutes ago, I was magically cured of that disease you gave me. Well, as you can clearly see, he's definitely not here right now. You know, if you're having such a tough time keeping track of him, maybe you should consider keeping him on a leash. Just forget it. It's done, it doesn't matter. Just tell me what the ridiculous deal you made Dipper agree to cure me was so I can undo it. Sorry. Doesn't work that way, sweetheart. Whether he was here or not, any kind of deal made between the two of us would have to stay between us. Interdimensional merchant to client confidentially and all. It would be up to him to tell you what he agreed to. You know, like it was up to you to tell him that you agreed to take over your mother's illness. Wendy winced. The truth in Cooper's words was cutting. While Cooper's inability to resist making that dig meant he had essentially outed himself and the fact that Dipper had indeed paid him a visit. This scenario was the exact reason she never wanted to tell Dipper the first place. Because Wendy knew he wouldn't hesitate to ruin his own life if it meant he could save hers. Screw it then. You've already been summoned, so let's go ahead and make another deal then. I don't care what the price is, just undo whatever fresh hell you heaped upon Dipper. I'm afraid I can't do that, miss, it's against the rules. One deal for one person. Otherwise, anyone who knew about my little shrine here would be visiting me every month demanding to renegotiate. Since we've already struck a deal, I'm afraid our business is complete. Unless you'd care to send somebody else my way who might want to undo your friend's wish. I can't do that. Then you'll just be tricking somebody else into ruining their lives, and I can't do that to anybody. Even for Dipper. Hey, now. I'm not playing tricks on anyone. Cooper snapped back, actually sounding genuinely annoyed. I'm an honest businessman. I was completely upfront with you about that was going to happen if I brought your mother back, and you agreed to it. Care to enlighten me on exactly what you think I deceived you on? You didn't tell me when I was going to get sick, Wendy grumbled bitterly. I had to infect you with the disease as soon as the deal was struck. My powers beyond the boundaries of this shrine are limited, so it's not like I could have shown up at your doorstep 20 years from now to infect you, and I highly doubt you would have honored our deal and returned to his shrine to complete our arrangement. I didn't deliberately deceive you. My mistake was assuming you knew how diseases work. This conversation is getting me nowhere. I've got to go find Dipper. Don't you go anywhere, because I may be back soon. Wendy stormed out of the cave, failing to notice the satisfied glint in Cooper's devious eye. I have a feeling you will sunshine. It's all part of the plan. It seemed to take forever, but Wendy finally found a clearing where she could get a couple of bars on her cell phone. Her first call was to Dipper, several actually, but each one went straight to voicemail. Frustrated, she decided to call Mabel to see if she knew anything. If Dipper entrusted his plans to anybody, it would have been his sister. It took several attempts, but a groggy Mabel finally answered the phone. Ugh. Hello. Wait, who the heck is calling me this late at night? It's almost 1 in the morning. Sorry Mabes, it's me Wendy. Oh, hey Wendy. Mabel's voice softened. If it was Wendy calling this late, it probably meant whatever was going on was important. Is everything okay? Not really. I need to know, have you heard from your brother recently? Yeah. A couple of days ago. Why? I just need to know where he is. Something bad might have happened to him, and I just need to find him and make sure he's okay. That's a scary thought. But I'm pretty sure he's at home right now cramming for his next semester of college. He hasn't been home recently, Mabel. Don't make a bigger deal out of his than it is, but he's been staying with me recently. Helping me out while I was sick. You were sick? When? How come I haven't heard about this? I'm sorry Mabes, I'll explain all that later. All you need to know for now is that I'm better, but I think Dipper's the one that might be in trouble now. He's not answering his phone when I call, so maybe he'll pick up if you try. Mabel was silent for what felt a short eternity before she finally replied. Wendy. Are you sure you're feeling well right now? Yeah, as good as I have in weeks. Why? Because you're not making any sense. I don't know who's been taking care of you while you've been sick, but it can't be my brother. Come on Mabel, why would I lie about this? Wendy. I don't know what's going on with you but Dipper's never set foot in Gravity Falls in his life.